How's it going, everybody? It's Yong here with a Metal Gear Survive trailer analysis. As I'm sure you're all aware by now, Konami announced Metal Gear Survive during Gamescom 2016 through an announcement trailer, and it's been kind of a shitstorm since, but regardless, I'm gonna go ahead and analyze the trailer and see what clues it's hiding in hopes that we may find out a little bit more about the game. There's a lot to talk about, so without further ado, let's dive right into it. The trailer opens with a scene that I'm sure many of you will recognize from Ground Zeroes, in which we see the utter obliteration of Militaire Sans Frontieres' mother base. Just in case, I compare the cutscenes in the trailer with the ones from Ground Zeroes just to see if they changed anything by any chance, but everything is exactly the same. That is until things become very different with this brand new cutscene where we see Big Boss and Kaz flying away from the crumbling mother base in a different perspective. We are then shown a close-up of one of the soldiers who was left stranded on an MSF mother base platform, and he looks pretty salty about his current circumstances. I actually really like the idea of a Metal Gear Solid 5 side story that happens in the perspective of the soldiers who were stranded on mother base during XOF's attack and somehow survived the ordeal. So I actually remember feeling pretty intrigued when I saw this portion of the trailer. But then everything kind of turns to shit when the most unexpected thing happens. A bunch of freaking wormholes open up, sucking everything in the vicinity into it. There are 5 wormholes in this shot, and you can actually see them popping up one by one above the various ravaged MSF platforms. Now, for those wondering, how the hell did Big Boss and company not see this when they escaped via chopper? And I guess one argument you could make is that by now, the chopper's hatch had been closed and they were a good distance away from Mother Base. But honestly, if I were you, I just wouldn't try to think too hard about the ifs and buts of the game's premise. It seems to be more of a goofy spin-off than something that is intended to be taken too seriously. Now, something that I would like to point out are these ravaged tower cranes, which look like the same ones that we see tumbling down in Ground Zeroes' cutscene. So I think it's safe to assume that this whole scene takes place on the same platform that Big Boss and Kaz escaped from. You can even see a similar ravaged tower crane in the background of this shot right next to the stranded MSF soldier. Speaking of the stranded MSF soldier, something that I noticed is that unlike the soldiers in Ground Zeroes' cutscene, there is no MSF insignia to be found on his left shoulder sleeve. I'm not sure if this was an oversight or if this was a conscious decision, but it's definitely strange. Maybe it's to further drive the point that this is some kind of spin-off, not to be associated too heavily with Ground Zeroes or something along those lines. I don't know. Anyway, moving on, we see the stranded soldier getting sucked into the wormhole himself. He's definitely not having the best of days. If you pause the footage at the right time, you can get a glimpse of this quick shot in which we see the soldier pretty high up in the air as he avoids incoming debris. From this height, it's possible to see many of MSF's ravaged mother base platforms in the background, which is kinda neat. This next shot shows us even more debris getting sucked into the wormhole alongside these corpses of XOF soldiers. The trailer then crossfades into another dimension where Metal Gear Survive takes place. Here we can see a bunch of containers falling through this wormhole alongside this pole that we will see later on. Now, I noticed that whereas the wormhole from MSF's mother base looks very different from anything we've ever seen, this one here actually has a lot of the same visual effects as the Fulton wormhole. The wormhole eventually closes, and this is then followed by a shot of a completely different soldier than the one we saw at the beginning of the trailer. I think one likely explanation for this is that Survival features some kind of character creation like MGS5. So we were probably looking at one customized character in the beginning of the trailer, and we're looking at another one in this shot. Moving on, we see the dude avoiding what looks to be a chunk of a walker gear. This actually doesn't make much sense when you consider that walker gears weren't developed until 1984 by Huey Emmerich. If the wormholes opened up after the attack on MSF's mother base like Konami claims, then this technology shouldn't even exist at this point. Then again, what is time when wormholes and alternate dimensions become a plot point? It's entirely possible that wormholes are opening up in other points in time and other dimensions, resulting in all kinds of technology from all kinds of times, timelines, places, and dimensions being dropped into this world. And we'll actually get to see more discrepancies like this, suggesting this possibility further in the trailer. We are then shown one of the game's zombie-like creatures, which Konami representatives have simply referred to as biological threats. One assumption that can be made is that we may be looking at some type of strange after effect of an alternate version of the parasites from Phantom Pain. Maybe these parasites were weaponized differently in this alternate dimension by, I don't know, Earth to Kotak or some shit. At the very least, the rough skin certainly bears some resemblance to the metallic archaea that the Skull's parasite unit came to be equipped with. So as this thing turns around, we are given a good look at what the biological threat looks like from the front. Most noteworthy of all is the glowing horn-like protrusion that has replaced the top half of its head. This certainly does bear some resemblance to the horn embedded in Venom Snake's skull during the events of Phantom Pain. So one popular assumption that I've heard is that Metal Gear Survive might all be happening inside Venom Snake's head during his coma. Honestly, that doesn't sound terribly far-fetched when you consider that wormholes and alternate dimensions are somehow involved in this game. If this is indeed true, then this is one fucked up way for someone to spend a 9-year coma. And speaking of Venom Snake's horn, interesting to note about this character is the injury on the left side of his head, which kinda looks similar to Venom Snake's injury from Ground Zeroes that resulted in the horn-like debris, so maybe there's further implication there, but it's just as likely that I'm looking too much into things and that this is just a random blood stain from some random head injury. After all, it is on the wrong side. Another interesting theory that I've heard is that this game might all be happening inside the heads of traumatized MSF survivors, and that this game might somehow tie into the erratic behavior that they exhibit in Phantom Pain when we find them wandering during side ops. That would actually be kinda cool. Anyway, moving along, we eventually see the character shoot the approaching biological threat in hopes to incapacitate him, but to no avail. Aim for the head, bro. Now, something that I noticed are these particles emanating from the creature, which look very similar to the particles that emanate from Phantom Pain's skull parasite unit. You may also notice that the environment is really foggy right now, also similar to when the skull's parasite unit appears, which further suggests that these biological threats might somehow be related to some alternate version of parasites and/or metallic archaea. The trailer's next shot gives us another close look at the character, and here you can see yet another strange discrepancy: his attire. Unlike the character shown in MSF's mother base who was wearing MSF attire, this guy here is wearing Diamond Dog's uniform. So the question is, if this guy came straight from the aftermath of Ground Zeroes, how is it that he's wearing Diamond Dog's uniform? My guess is that this was either some kind of oversight or a result of just reusing assets from Phantom Pain. Another possibility is that this was done on purpose and has other implications. Maybe this particular character comes from another time or dimension in which they used Diamond Dog's outfit, or maybe this is further hinting that this is all happening in Venom Snake's head, although if he's still in a coma, I don't know how he would know the appearance of this uniform since he has yet to establish Diamond Dog's. I don't even know if this is something I should be thinking so hard about, it's just something I thought I'd point out. Also interesting to note about his suit is that the Diamond Dog's insignias are nowhere to be found on his shoulder sleeves, similarly to how the previous character we saw didn't have any MSF insignias. Again, it's hard to say whether this was an oversight or a conscious decision to provide hints about the true nature of Metal Gear Survive, like the game possibly happening inside Venom Snake's head or an MSF soldier's head, or perhaps this is a subtle way of telling us that this is a spin-off, not to be too seriously associated with Ground Zeroes or Phantom Pain. Again, I don't know, but very strange indeed. Anyway, moving along, the guy gets owned by the creature right here, after which he picks up what I'm assuming to be one of Survive's many weapons, the pipe, which we saw being dropped earlier in the trailer. Something that the trailer makes very clear is that we will see a lot of variety in weapon types in this game, one thing that Phantom Pain certainly didn't lack. But unlike Phantom Pain, there will probably be some rustic or primitive weapons as these characters attempt to survive the extra-dimensional post-apocalyptic setting. The camera then pans up, and if you pause right here, you may notice that there are other wormholes in the background. These will also probably drop containers and an assortment of things from other timelines and dimensions that players may be able to make use of throughout the game. Now, I find it peculiar that these wormholes seem to be opening up around the creature, so one thought that came to mind is that maybe these creatures somehow trigger the appearance of these wormholes. Maybe their horn-like protrusions have something to do with that, and maybe that's why the horn has this orange glow that's similar to the color of the wormholes. Or it could be the other way around. Maybe the wormholes appear randomly, but these creatures, for whatever reason, gravitate towards them and somehow know where they will appear? Maybe their orange glowing horn is some kind of radar? Not sure, just throwing stuff out there. We then see the dude engage in a desperate struggle before he spots someone else in the distance, after which he reaches out in desperation. Now, something I would like to make note of are some of these bloodstains scattered throughout the character's suit. One interesting feature of Phantom Pain was that any characters who got shot would get bloodied up in real time, and it seems highly likely that the feature will make a return for Survive. Here is yet another close-up of the zombie-like creature and the horn-like protrusion. Something else that it reminds me of are the explosive spikes that the armor unit skulls and Sahelanthropus can erect using the properties of metallic archaea. While Phantom Pain's metallic spikes didn't have this kind of orange glow, it does look like there might be some relation. Regardless of what the true nature of this protrusion is, it certainly does seem to play an important role in gameplay. Check out this next shot in which we see an arrow shot directly onto the spike, after which the creature immediately dies. So it looks like for these particular types of enemies, the glowing spike on the head might be their weak point. Moving on, the character looks back with the most "the fuck" expression he could make, and there stands 3 more characters to join the party. I think it's safe to assume that they are also customized characters who will be controlled by other players online. Konami has said time and again that Metal Gear Survive is at its core a 4-player stealth co-op multiplayer experience above all else, and that's what the trailer seems to be emphasizing here. Now, with a cutscene style presentation, it's also possible we might be looking at a cutscene from a single-player mode, so these particular characters might be NPCs controlled by AI who you can join forces with if you decide to play alone. Regardless, the basic idea of a 4-player co-op experience comes across. We are also shown some more weapons that will be featured in the game. The lady in the middle here is holding a bow and arrow. The man on the right here is holding some type of spear, and the heavily armed soldier on the left seems to be equipped with some kind of shotgun. You may also notice that all these characters are wearing very different attires from each other, suggesting that the game will feature lots of customization features as far as equipment goes. Now, in MGO3, armor and equipment didn't affect stats and were mostly cosmetic, but with a game like Metal Gear Survive, I think it's more likely that the equipment players wear in this game will affect certain stats and determine the class or role you'll be playing. So the guy on the left here is clearly a heavy soldier type of character. He probably moves slower and makes a lot of noise when treading about, but is very effective in firefights. The other 2 characters, on the other hand, are much more lightly equipped, which means they probably move faster and more stealthily, wielding weapons like bow and arrows and spears that make much less noise than a shotgun. If you ask me, I don't see this game forcing players to choose a class at the beginning of the game. I think it'll have players naturally develop their own class through the weapons, equipment, skills, and abilities that they choose as they play, but we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, we then see the other 3 characters helping the newbie out, scouting the area, making sure that the creature is really dead, and all the usual things involved in a desperate post-apocalyptic situation. Then, in the next shot, we see the player character joining the party, and as that's happening, notice how the other characters are now carrying with them the containers that we saw falling through the wormhole in this previous shot. It looks like another important element to Metal Gear Survive will be gathering resources. The way I think it will work is that in order to survive in this harsh world, players will have to be on constant lookout to search and gather resources dropped from Mother Base into this dimension through wormholes. And based on discrepancies that can be spotted in the trailer, like the walker gear that won't be built for another 9 years, perhaps resources will come from a wide spectrum of times, timelines, and dimensions. It is also my belief that these wormholes aren't a phenomenon that will happen just once at the beginning of the game. I believe that throughout the entirety of the game, wormholes will keep appearing at random times and locations to constantly drop resources and all kinds of things from an infinite pool of dimensions and timelines. Furthermore, I also believe that the game will offer players ways to determine when and where wormholes will open up in the game world. Notice how these 3 other characters seem to have come just at the right time. It's almost as if they knew there would be a wormhole appearing at this exact location, expecting new resources to flow through, only to find someone being attacked by one of the biological threats along the way. I think this idea of having to seek out and be on the lookout for wormholes in order to gain resources could create a really interesting dynamic and possibly separate Metal Gear Survive from other survival games. Something else that the implementation of constantly appearing wormholes could do is act as a meta plot element for why new people keep appearing at different times. Each player's game could represent a different dimension, and anytime a new player logs into the game for the first time, you could say that a new wormhole from another time and dimension will have brought a new MSF survivor into Survive's ravaged world. I think it makes a lot of sense. So bottom line, I think wormholes will appear constantly throughout the game, serving a pivotal purpose in both the story and gameplay. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's continue analyzing the trailer. We are then shown this party of 4 making their way to what looks to be their base of operations, which brings us to yet another discrepancy. Why are we seeing a ravaged version of Diamond Dog's mother base instead of MSF's when the game is supposed to pick up shortly after Ground Zeroes? Again, this could either be an oversight, it could be that reusing Phantom Pain's mother base was just a lot easier than having to recreate Peace Walker's mother base, or maybe there's some kind of in-game explanation. Maybe this edifice was transported from some time or some dimension in which Diamond Dog's mother base platforms were built. Or maybe this mother base was already in this dimension and just happens to look like the Diamond Dog's mother base from other dimensions and was found ravaged here for unknown reasons. With how ridiculous the plot is already, I'm sure they'll come up with some crazy explanation. Anyway, some interesting things to note about this shot is just how expansive this area is. I get the feeling that we will see open world return in some capacity. In fact, this was something that was hinted at by Konami US in one of their Reddit posts. They've already got the Fox engine, MGS5's assets, and the infrastructure to make this game have some form of open environment, so I think it's entirely plausible. But the most important thing to note about this shot is that it suggests that one of Survive's key gameplay features might be rebuilding your base of operations in a similar fashion to Phantom Pain, with resource gathering likely playing a big part in this. You can already see that this base has been built up a decent amount with these fences guarding the perimeter, along with these guards patrolling the area. Now, something else that Konami US hinted at recently is that the Fulton recovery system might make a return in this game. I'm thinking that maybe Fultons will be used to recruit AI soldiers who came from other dimensions through wormholes. I'm thinking that whereas human players can act as partners who can follow you around wherever you go, like out into the wilderness, maybe these AI soldiers would be confined to the base of operations and act as guards, a lot like most of the soldiers you recruit in Phantom Pain. Now, with the kind of ravaged world this is, I'd imagine that if there are Fultons in this game, they would be much more limited in supply than in Phantom Pain, with resources likely being much more scarce and all. But yeah, MGS5 style base building in a post-apocalyptic scenario could be really interesting depending on how much depth they add to this aspect. I think something that a lot of people were disappointed at with Phantom Pain is that Mother Base wasn't nearly as customizable as was advertised. So if Konami can expand upon the original concept and allow players to fully customize their base and really make it their own, this could end up being a really cool feature. I think this feature is especially pivotal for a game like Survive, because according to one of Konami US's Reddit posts, the game will have players defending their base from time to time from hordes of enemies. So a deep and proper base customization system would allow players to build their base and reinforce its defenses in accordance to their preferences, which is perfect for a game like this in which players will experience attacks from hordes of zombies. And as a matter of fact, that is exactly what the trailer shows next. In this shot, we are shown a mob of these biological threats from beyond the fence slowly making their way towards the base. Now, I noticed that there's a lot of variety in the attire that each of these creatures is wearing, ranging from civilian clothes to military gear. It really makes you wonder just what the hell happened in this dimension that got so many people, I guess, infected. My guess is that there was some kind of outbreak or pandemic, as is often the case with these types of premises. Perhaps a variation of the parasites from Phantom Pain got out, spread all over the world, and caused this apocalyptic dystopia or something. Whatever this infection might be, one common symptom seems to be that it causes the top half of the infected's head to become replaced with these orange glowing horns. Very mysterious indeed. This next shot shows us a close-up of the horde of zombies attempting to attack the base, who have been stopped by this fence perimeter. Now I notice that these fences have some holes on them, which seems to suggest that these fences will take damage and wear down as these creatures keep attacking, so players might have to be on the lookout for that. I'm also assuming that after one of these battles, players will have to rebuild, reinforce, and maybe even upgrade these fences along with other defenses by using some of their gathered resources. I'm also expecting that Konami will show other types of defenses in the near future. Moving on, the trailer reveals that it has shifted its perspective to a different party of 4 characters who are working together to survive this onslaught and defend the base. One of the characters is this heavily armored guy who is wielding a spear and is using it to great effect. Speaking of the spear, here's a nice close-up of the weapon, and as is to be expected from the Fox engine, you can see a lot of detail on these weapon models, and the graphics in general for Survive look pretty good from what I can tell, and I think this can be attributed to the awesome work that Kojima Productions did with the Fox engine. As the camera pans, we are shown that there is yet another character in this party wielding a spear. Behind him, we can see a bunch of containers and resources scattered around, and in the background is what looks to be that ravaged mother base platform we saw earlier, further indicating that we're indeed looking at what base defense looks like in Survive from inside the fences. We are then shown the final 2 characters fighting alongside the heavily armored dude with the spear from before. One of them wields a shotgun, while the other one wields a bow and arrow. Once again, I would like to point out that these characters are very distinct from each other, with different facial features and attributes, different haircuts, different uniforms and attire, different weapons, etc., likely further showcasing the game's wide range of customization options, both cosmetic and essential. We then get to see the shotgun being used to great effect. You can't really have a zombie game without a shotgun, can ya? Something that I noticed is that this zombie on the right seems to be wearing the same attire as some of the Afghanistan soldiers from Phantom Pain. My guess is that this has more to do with reusing assets from Phantom Pain to make life easier than anything else, but we'll see. Moving along, after another close-up of the grotesque-looking biological threats, we are shown the female character in this party readying her bow while using this rather unique arrow, the effects of which we'll see in a moment. Along with the same skyline of a ravaged mother base in the distance, we can also see things like tents set up behind the character, along with these beer bottles and the trademark cardboard box sitting on top of these wooden tables in the background. It looks like some kind of lounge area for this guard post. Now, with this being the last new weapon that the trailer shows off, let's go ahead and list out all of the weapons confirmed from this trailer. So far, they are the pistol, the pipe, the spear, the shotgun, the bow and arrow, and the bow and arrow with a propeller arrow head. The final game will likely have a much wider range of weapons, but these are the ones we know of so far. And yes, you heard me right, we aren't looking at an explosive arrowhead like many of you might assume, but rather a propeller arrowhead. Notice how after she shoots the arrow and hits the mark, the arrow is sticking out quite a bit, and a split second later, it plunges itself into the creature with great force. So yeah, definitely a very unique arrow type with a cool effect. With how powerful these look, I'm gonna go ahead and assume that this ammo type will be quite scarce, at least compared to regular arrows, so it's probably wise to reserve these for the toughest of situations or enemies. Thus, the trailer concludes as we are shown the title Metal Gear Survive. Something that Konami has emphasized is that this game will be a spin-off companion piece to MGS5, which explains why one of the V's in Survive is bigger than all the others, and is highlighted by the spread of what I'm assuming to be the parasite infection that causes the zombie post-apocalypse in this dimension. I would also like to note that the way the rocky material turns into this horn shape reminds me once again of Venom Snake's horn, which might be another intentional nod to MGS5. After the title, we are shown one last sequence in which the Earth starts shaking as something enormous approaches, resulting in all 4 party members to lose their balance. In this final shot, we see the 4 characters of this party together: Bow and Arrow Chick, the 2 Spear Dudes, and Shotgun Man. Surrounding them is this fence that keeps the horde of biological threats at bay, and you can tell they've killed quite a few by all the bloodstains scattered around. And then, bam, we see the giant creature taking a step so heavy that it causes a powerful shockwave, throwing everything in the vicinity off balance. It's also quite clear that we are seeing the first-person perspective of this massive being. The implications of this scene seems quite clear. some type of Metal Gear is approaching the base. Whether this game will feature a brand new Metal Gear, or if it will bring in familiar Metal Gears from other times or dimensions is yet to be determined. I'd personally love to see a mix of both. I wouldn't mind seeing what new Metal Gear designs they come up with, but it would also be cool if the wormhole snatched up, I don't know, a Metal Gear Rex or a Metal Gear Ray from some time or some dimension and just brought it here. The game already seems crazy enough as it is, so I don't see why this couldn't happen. The trailer closes as it cuts to black, which is then followed by a fearsome roar. If you've played any Metal Gear Solid games, then you will know that Metal Gears do indeed have the capacity to emit these types of fierce roars, and it looks like it'll be no different in Metal Gear Survive. Thus, the trailer concludes as it displays a 2017 release window. And with that, I would like to end this trailer analysis. Thank you for tuning in. Let us know in the comments below if I missed anything or if I made any mistakes or if you noticed anything that I didn't. And also be sure to share your thoughts and theories regarding Metal Gear Survive's trailer. And to be further updated on Metal Gear news, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Yong out.